It is my pleasure to introduce our last guest. And I'm very, very happy that art director of a UCAL collective, Ustwo Games, Fernández Huerta, is here to talk for the first time about a hugely successful game that was recently launched. That's called Monument Valley 2. So please help me welcome with a round of applause, Fernández Huerta. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is David. I was the art director of Monument Valley 2. The lead artist at Ustwo Games. And I want to talk a bit about me first and why I make games, so you feel like I'm a human. I didn't play this game when it came out. It's Pitfall. It came out before I was born. But I played when I was 13 or so. I saw it as like, God, this is so beautiful and simple and nice. If I was able to do something like this, people would like me. And it sounds like a very weird goal, like a bit pedestrian, but I think that is, I don't know, like having that, making your job to be nice to people, I think is a very valuable thing. And funny enough, a couple of months after playing Pitfall, this program has been mentioned before in these talks just a few minutes ago, I came across Click and Play, which is a games editor, but that lets you, without any knowledge of programming, create your own games. So I made my own games in Click and Play, like since I was 13 to about 20 or something. This is one of them that looks suspiciously like Pitfall, but it's all about defeating big monsters. Anyway, I never thought of this as more than a hobby, and then I studied art. But then after that, like, well, maybe that whole thing of games is a job. So after doing my stuff in Click and Play, which is there, I found a job. I've been the kind of like the only artist on the team. We made a game for the Nintendo DS. It was called Animal Boxing. It's here. You punch cute animals in the face. And it wasn't very successful, but it was okay. But the whole team was fired. So the core team, we kind of like set up an indie studio. Basically, my boss put another mortgage on his house or something. And we make this other game called Zombie Panic in Wonderland for WiiWare. That's all back in Spain. Which was a bit successful in Japan, but nowhere else. And at some point, so I don't know, we started doing kind of like working on sequels or spin-offs or the same thing. It's like, this is not really working. And I don't like sequels. I'm talking about Monument Valley 2. I don't like sequels, so I decided to quit my job. And I became a freelancer, and I did some kind of like illustration and art for 2D mobile games. I didn't know anything about mobile back then, but no one really knew. But I'm really horrible at being a freelancer. I don't get my clients to pay me, and I have to find new ones, and they're all really crap, so I can't show anything because they don't finish the project, blah, blah, blah. You don't care. But anyway, I needed a job. But in the meantime, I also did some game jams. This one here is a game that I worked for. It was a couple of days, but I managed to meet a really good programmer who eventually I got hired asked to, so do game jams. And this is an example of my kind of like personal illustrations back then. I don't know how I draw anymore because it's been too long. But after this, I joined Ustwo. And Ustwo is not a games company. Ustwo is a kind of like a visual design UI UX studio that works for very big clients. And the problem with that is that most work that you do, even if it's for very big clients, is all secret. So you can't really show anything. And that made, one of the founders, which is this guy, this is one of the two of the Us two. His name is Mills. Kind of like amongst all the people, they have this idea of like, why don't we do this kind of like team that we don't have to worry about making money? It's just like to show off how cool we are and making cool things, and he kept saying like, don't worry about the money, just wow, because he speaks like that. So then there was born the games team in Ustwo. Some of the games that they made before I joined were Whale Trail and Blip Blop. Blip Blop, if people don't like how easy Monument Valley is, they can try Blip Blop. It's not easy. So after that I joined, and we made another game. That Kevin Spacey plays when he's the president. It's a very intellectual game. So that you got even fictional presidents play Monument Valley. So it became really big, and it was a surprise for us. We didn't expect having so much success. We kind of like thought it was going to do okay, but that became kind of like now with the guys, the Monument Valley guys. So the next thing that we wanted to do was something different. We wanted to try VR, being like a new way of bringing experiences to players. And we really care about making games that are perfect for the platform in the way that Monument Valley was perfect for a touch device that lets you just interact directly with the architecture. In Land's End, you can be in this world that we created for you to explore. And it worked really well, but that didn't prevent people for asking for more. So eventually, we did. So that's Monument Valley 2, which we announced and released at the same time a few weeks ago. I think it was only like 4 weeks ago. And again, this is it was a bit tricky for me because I don't want to work on sequels, and in the beginning I wasn't really working on this project, but I ended up being the art director on it. And I hate sequels, but I watch them all. It's kind of like some soul-searching research. And people ask, why did you make a sequel? But for me, the question that is more interesting is, why do you make a sequel like this? In the case of Fast and the Furious, why did you put tanks on a car movie? And for me, I know, growing up, thinking about what are the good sequels? What is about them that is not just derivative word? So in the case of Empire Strikes Back, it doesn't just talk about Star Wars like many sequels do. They go back and just look backwards to talk about their own world. Empire Strikes Back has this deeply personal story with the characters' motivations being like this having to choose between family and friends and having all these kind of like internal struggles. And if you look at all the sequels kind of like around that time or kind of like 80s, 90s, and you have like Aliens, when Ripley is kind of like trying to substitute her lost daughter with this new character that she meets. There's Terminator 2, and of course there's The Godfather 2. They're about family somehow, especially The Godfather 2. So this ended up being a really big theme in Monument Valley, and maybe personal. That's my son Atlas. He's 2 years old now. And to me, making a game about my experience as a parent made it really, really interesting to translate this abstract, beautiful world, it's kind of like sterile, into something that feels deeply personal. That was a challenge that was really, really fun to tackle. This is the team now, plus a few people. This is Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. I didn't put this picture here to show off. It's the only picture that I had with the whole team in it. Plus a few people. There's, where am I? Where are you? That's Mills, one of the founders of the company. That's Sinks, one of the other founder. And Steve works in marketing. So they're not kind of like involved in the, they're not the core team, but the rest of us, that's the team as it stands now, which is a big growth from the original team that made Monument Valley 1, which were like 8 people, and we're 18 now. And all these people also bring new ideas. These are all games or illustrations made by the people who joined since we released Land's End. And all these new ideas really helped us develop Monument Valley 2 into something else. But also brought this question or struggle almost to, like, we thought like, oh yeah, Monument Valley, we've done this forever. Like, it should be easy to just make more. But we need to explain to all these new people what is a Monument Valley level. And I'm going to explain to you now. So Monument Valley levels have, there's a few, you can define them in multiple ways, but we always talk, at least from the kind of like experiential point of view, having 3 pillars. Like every screen in Monument Valley had to work as an interaction. It has to be playful, it has to be joyful and touchable. It has to be architecture. Monument Valley is a place, and they have to be places for you to explore. And as we kept saying, is a work of art, or we kept saying every screen in the game you should be able to print out and put on a wall. And in some cases we did. So, and one very important thing as well is that the important thing about Monument Valley is the surprise, and is the unexpected thing at the turn of every corner. What's going on now? What's going to be like? The art isn't. We found that is enough reward for people, and also we wanted people to finish the game. So I'm going to actually ask a question. How many of you have played Monument Valley? All right, quite a few. How many of you have finished Monument Valley? See, almost as many. How many of you have played Monument Valley 2? Okay, there's going to be spoilers here. Well, anyway, we really wanted this experience to be an experience that you start and finish. But this Monument Valley 2 thing, why isn't it not just another content pack? And we asked ourselves this question for a long time, like even deep into the developments, like this is just more levels, right? And we ended up finding out that it's the new characters and it's the new storylines and the new themes that make it a new game, and the theme of family in the case really make it shine. So I'm a bit indecisive when I'm working, and I try and do as much as possible. So yeah, we keep saying that we cast the net very wide. And it's true. We started working on Morning Valley 2 with the old Morning Valley 1 tools. There's me working really intensely in some of the first levels that have the new totem. And one of the ideas actually originally was to have a bunch of new totems with a bunch of new abilities on them, which still sounds interesting. Who knows, maybe in the future. But eventually we started working on new tools and all that, and I was kind of like involved with other things. So we set up a tiny team of like maybe 2-3 people to start working on all these things. The lead designer of the game, Jonathan Topf, did this kind of like inspiration or exploration pictures right in the beginning, which is funny because I wasn't like, now there is a screen that looks very similar to this, but I wasn't looking at this when I did it. We started like looking at maybe what if the game is in landscape instead of portrait and things like that. And eventually we decided to like, maybe we made a good decision in the first place. So when I joined the team, and that was like 3 or 4 months after the project was running, and like there was a lot of tech being worked on, but it wasn't, so there were new mechanics, but there wasn't really kind of like a visual style or an identity for the game, and I really wanted to focus on that. So I started working on characters. So I designed a handful of them, tried to kind of like cover as much as possible. We have like creepy ghosts and maybe like a 1940s dude. And I kept working on new characters, kind of like maybe a bit more fantasy or more detail, and I kind of like priest. This is a fan favorite. And eventually, after, I don't know, many characters, I started working on this idea of having 2 characters, and the idea of families. There is RuPaul here as well. We love drag queens. So, okay, there's a bunch of characters. That's all very good, but we don't know what the game looks like. So we decided to put the characters to aside for a bit. I started working on visuals. I was thinking like, well, maybe it's like much more detail, and maybe it has like textures, and it's like the world feels more alive. Maybe we can go back to places in the original Morning Valley that we didn't explore. What happens to the totem when the totem is underwater? Also experimenting with the idea of having materials that are a bit more physical, that have reflections, have glows, to make it feel more fresh and new. Also playing with the idea of having lots of colors and kind of like illustration details, elephants, and also having this idea of like maybe it's more story focused, having this like strong story moment. What if we have this character that, oh, sorry, spoilers. What if we have this, yeah, that was the Beauty and the Beast. What if we have this character that's kind of like searching for a quest or something, and she finds either the Queen of Crows, now that she's finally in her true self or whatever, or maybe it's a character is depressed and has to traverse these kind of like horrible places. And after some time, we thought like, well, you know what, maybe the game is about all those things. Maybe we don't have to choose, maybe we can have a whole library for us of different characters and different themes and different visual styles, and we decided that the game was going to be, instead of, if Morning Valley 1 was a book that had chapters, this will be like an anthology that had books instead of chapters, and every character will have like it's like Harry Potter, there's 7 Harry Potter books, but something similar, having like a series of characters, and maybe you choose character rather than choosing level. So we run with that, and we did a bit of preliminary work and decided on a bunch of characters that were exciting to us, like maybe we can use again the characters from the first one. There's this modern tile that we decided maybe they're like, we didn't know what the story about them was. They're like a couple of lovers, this kind of depressed person that is searching for a new self, and that's herself after she's realized who she is. And again, the idea of having loads and loads of totems. So we run with it, and kind of like started again to build from the ground. And I always like to talk about the inspirations behind the game, because I think that's something that people enjoy, and it's really fun to always to compare. And of course, MCS was very important in the original game, but maybe it was too important. Like, we didn't want to, like, that's a bit too much MCS. So we said, okay, goodbye MCS, we're not looking at you anymore. It's going to retain the impossibility of it, but we're going to be looking at more examples of beautiful architecture from around the world, like spectacular places. We're going to be looking like maybe Art Deco, and new different artists, like this one of my favorite Spanish artists, Eduardo Chillida, which does, or did, these amazing like minimalist sculptures. Like maybe like more colorful modern art, visual graphic design, like illustration, interior design, fashion design, lots of things. And that's maybe too many things, but the way I like to organize all this is usually with Pinterest. I have like 5 different Pinterest boards for just Monument Valley 2. But this is very, it doesn't work very well for teamwork. So what we do is that we print out all these things, and we use these foams, these foam boards that we put the inspirations on, and we just like, because we try and hot desk as much as possible, to just pick up your thing and you move around, and you bring your inspiration with you, and you kind of like, everyone is able to see what's going on, and it's really interesting. It really makes everyone feel like they're working towards something. It's not just like, oh, the programmers are making tools, so they're not really making the game, or the designers are designing the levels, but what people like is the graphics, or the artists might think, oh, but it's the designers who do everything. So I don't know, I think having everything visible all the time makes everyone feel involved, and everyone is welcome to comment. So I'm going to share a bunch of inspirations that we had in the game. This is actually my mother-in-law's hometown, so she's very happy that I put this here. But kind of like, I wasn't looking at this tower when I made this level, but it's kind of like having all those things in the back of your mind. Like in this case, Lauren, one of our artists, she just kind of like took this detail there, so it doesn't have to be like the whole general thing for it, but maybe a detail. Maybe it's like the colors of the architecture, again, or the atmosphere. Maybe it's details on the colors of kind of like ceramics, or the color of candy. So like color palette can be a very good inspiration. Drag queens again. Surprising, right? Well, as us, Nicki Minaj. So color palettes can come from everywhere, and kind of like the experience is very important to have this, I don't know, idea of like Polly Pocket, why not? Because, I mean, Polly Pocket and Monument Valley are basically the same thing. It's a tiny world that you have in the palm of your hand, and you interact with, and you move the characters around. Also, our own life experiences. I went on holiday to Pompeii, and I loved it, and I don't know, like being able to bring your own experiences to the game is really, really enjoyable. Again, close to Pompeii, so Herculaneum, also beautiful and dramatic. Or, I don't know, records that I have at home. Again, I'm not necessarily looking at the picture, but it's things that over time you kind of like accumulating in the back of your mind. This is an illustration that I really like. That was kind of like using as inspiration for another project, and somehow, I don't know, in retrospect, I think that it made an impact on me more than I thought. And again, holiday posters, old Disney films, concept art, Bauhaus posters, the brutalist architecture. James Turrell is a light installation artist. Henry Matisse, Olga Rosenova. But what we're doing is not this, or at least we hope it's not. What we're doing is more this, is taking a work of art that already exists and take a few elements of it, transform it to make a new, give that work of art a new meaning and use it for both for our own advantage and also as a kind of like homage to all the beautiful things in our history and the world. And by the way, I always recommend this book if you're interested in color. It's really, really good, The Interaction of Colors by Joseph Albers. But anyway, moving on, how does all this work in Engine? Because many people think that Monument Valley 2 is made of 2D illustrations, when actually it's made in 3D. So we have a bunch of new tools in Monument Valley 2 that lets us create these levels very easily, or at least construct them. Designing them is another thing. So in this case, you can kind of like extrude blocks and change blocks properties from being cubes into stairs, and maybe I'm gonna pop up a door there. Come on, rotate. And it's really easy to modify the scenes. It's very malleable. Everyone in the team can do it. It's not just down to the programmers, or it's not just down to the game designers. Like, everyone has a very good understanding of the systems, and it's very approachable. And the tools, the tech team did a really, really awesome job at tools. So you can put a hat on the tower, and then you can play, and it's instantly playable. We made the game in Unity, as you can see for the UI, if you know Unity, and it just works. And another thing that people always ask about is the impossibility. So you'll notice here that that doesn't make any sense. That floor goes into this. Oh, what? And this is because everything works on screen space. There's no perspective in the game. Everything is flat. So you see that the character just teleports when she needs to be. Then the system just knows. So yeah, having all these tools really lets us make this all these amazing looking levels much more easily than the first one. And another thing that works, no, that's correct. Come on, finish. Another thing that you'll have noticed is the vibrancy of the colors in the game. And even in the first one, this is a very common way of doing lighting in games and color, which is you have an ambient light and you have a light color. And you don't really have a say in how much of that is in any particular place. And you see that these are the colors that we've chosen, but these are the colors that are displaying in the thing. And who is this guy? Like, no one invited him here. So we created this new shader to kind of like try to replicate this this thing with the isometric. That was the word. With isometric illustration that is having 3 different colors for the 3 different main faces of the work. So we created a shader that basically does that and has 3 slots, and you can put 3 colors in, and everything is colored, and has a bunch of new options as well. So you can have AO, and you have light multiplayer, and a bunch of things. And in the second game, we wanted to really bring that concept to the maximum, and we created this shader we call the Uber shader, and this is a really quick version of a video that I took. I'm going to click on all the things, and I thought it was going to be 1 minute, and it was 7 minutes long, so that's the reason why it's so fast. But you can see, like, we have now gradients instead of just flat colors, so we can have this kind of like lighting effects very easily. You can tint the thing, we can use a noise texture on top of that. what is it showing now? You can put the texture wherever you want. Again, changing colors, giving it a rim, AO. You can have a fog in vertical. You can have a clip plane to. It's very useful when you're doing water, things that come out of the water, and all these things. Like it gave us so many tools to work on the game. And one of the first things that I did is like I modeled this very basic scene and tried the new gradient shader and how many things you can just infer and suggest just by using this like really quickly made color choices. That maybe this was like 2 hours of work or something like that. It's just like, and it's more down to you choosing rather than like the system being slow. So having all these tools, I started looking at. We didn't have any more artists at the time. I started looking at what the game would look like. So I made these images, kind of like a benchmark of what the game would be. This kind of made it into the final game. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but like nothing here survives. But it gave us a very good understanding of the limits of what we wanted to do, and like what if there's lots of people and like having like 2D things on top of 3D worlds, or maybe having normal maps, crazy. Kind of like trying to push the limits of what the Monument Valley visuals are. And of course, lots of changes. Monument Valley 2 is a game that changed a lot. For the few of you that have played Monument Valley 2, you probably will have realized that most of the things that I talked about up until this point, they're not in the game. Not even the core concept of the game. And the most basic change that Monument Valley levels go through is from going from white box to visually complete. And people, I don't know, like we were working on the game for a number of months, and people thought that they understood the game when they were making it, not just like user testers, which we did a lot of. But we thought that like, okay, that's the game and that's the experience. And then we make the graphics for it, and with all these amazing colors and details, and suddenly it brings a new life. And the user experience changes so much from having just the functional levels to having this like very much more detailed and much more atmospheric and kind of like have elements of storytelling that really bring the experience together. But again, so this is one example of like this is one of the puzzles in the game that is still in the game, but if you've seen the game, you probably don't recognize this. The idea of the mother and child originally is that they were refugees and they were looking for a new home. So that was the first try of one of those levels. It was meant to be a tutorial level, really simple. And again, going with this refugee element, we had like a queue of people that want to get in the country or something. And we had a bit of impossibility here because it's Monument Valley. And we like that, so we brought it to the final polish level of a level that a level can have. You'll realize that these are not the characters in the game and that this level is not in the game. Because at some point, we decided to change the complete story of the game, and this didn't have a place anymore, and also was a level with too much detail for how early in the game it was. So okay, let's put that to the side. And because we didn't know what the story was, we made a version that basically had no graphics and not even kind of like a storytelling element to it. And eventually we had a story, so we made a new version that was in a level that had a bit of storytelling, and then we did the graphics for it, and then we polished it into the final version. And this happened with many levels. And you'll see that this was one of the levels that that I worked on for the visual benchmark at the beginning and how different it looks. And there's several reasons. Again, we don't have these people around anymore. And kind of like this temple didn't make sense. And also this color palette was in a level that was immediately after this. So I couldn't use again this color palette. So everything had to change for good reasons. But in some other cases, they almost don't change at all. This is how the level was designed, and this is how the level looks in the game. We add a bunch of textures and a bunch of detail, but it really changes a lot between levels. In some, you can kind of like see where it's going. In others, they go through kind of like intermediate phases until they find the true self. And others have like surprising outcomes. And again, sometimes like there is a sense of place in the original design, but we decide to not use it for whatever reason. And things can change a lot, and kind of like we might want to bring this, like there's no impossibility here, so we want to make sure that everything has these optical illusions. And sometimes the designer decides like it's inspired by a work of art, so in the level these elements are brought in, and this level went through many changes, and in the end it doesn't look anything like the original inspiration. But that is fine. Again, this is another bit on the same level that changed a lot. It became a tower, it became a pit, and also this is not in the game anymore because it looks like this now. Even this thing used to be a new totem. Some others is like gain a bit of sense of place when you're making it, so they go through what we call visually functional, which is the puzzle design plus a bit of a sense of place, not necessarily colors or shapes, but something to them. And these things, even the visually functional is not set in stone. So I wanted here when I was working that this wasn't very interesting to walk around, it's just a walkway. So I made this whole wall here walkable and make this big arch to really bring it together. So lots of things can change at like any point. And we try to embrace that. Why is this white? I don't understand. So everything can change, and even the story can change. And if I've been talking about having different stories and different characters, and at this point, we realized that it was a bit too much. But maybe I'm talking a bit ahead of myself. What we define as story is not necessarily what most people think of as story. We like structuring a story as moments, and we ask ourselves kind of like these questions when we were working on a story moment, like what's the action that's happening? What does the player know what they're doing? And what's the tone? What is the player supposed to be feeling? And the character, what's the character feeling? And how is the character changing and evolving as the narrative goes on? And the kind of like the deepest layer on this is the story, but it's not really the important thing. Like we develop all these moments and we just reshuffle them when we think that there might be a better story to tell. So we have this bunch of characters, and okay, that's cool. And we started working on that idea and having different strings of levels. And this is the first playable demo that we did, and it was with the mother and the child, and ended up being in this inside the temple when you meet this gang of totems. And it was cool, so we decided to keep working on this idea, and in December, it's only 6 months ago when we released, before releasing the game, and in December we still had this, we made this demo with several levels that had, and basically this was all that was after almost a year of work. We had 6 levels that we kind of liked, and that only one of them is in the game. Oh, 2, sorry. And we have these different characters. That's cool. This character is kind of like a scientist of Morning Valleys trying to find about the trees and the rocks and whatnot. And you have the mother and the child exploring this ruined city in the water. This moment made it into the game in a completely different place. This was how the game started back then, only 6 months ago. We had different levels with a totem that were much more difficult as there was in the game. No one could complete them. It was horrible. And we had, again, this like much more detailed, kind of like realistic looking level. And we had the trees level, which is, I think, the only one that looks almost the same as it looked 6 months ago. But again, a character that we don't have in the game. And people, this moment in the game, people really like, because it's the moment where one of the characters grows. But you'll notice that it wasn't designed for that at all. It's just like a happy coincidence. So yeah, as you can see, like everything seems overly complicated, and we only had 6 months, and people were starting to freak out, and it's like, we're not gonna be able to make it, and I don't know, we'll never know if we would have been, but we decided that it was a bit too much. So we decided to bring all back to having the 2 characters that we always, when we made a demo, we always started with. There were the mother and the child, and people really related to that. And also, it's a very, weirdly, everyone has at some point had a mother in their life. But in games, you don't see many mothers. And especially, you don't play any of them. So we wanted really to bring a character that is underrepresented, but it's a story that is universal. And we didn't want to tell just the story of the kid growing up and kind of like the coming-of-age story that everyone has told a million years. We wanted to tell the story of the person who is back at home when the kid is having adventures, what happens to the parent. So we needed to give them a reason to be in this world, and we decided at first that they were going to be the architects of Monument Valley, and they were going to be building these big structures, and at the end of every level you have this kind of like interactive thing that builds the end of the level, and it's very exciting and all that. And we came up with kind of like a few story moments that we wanted. What happens at the beginning, what happens when they separate. And this is also something that I'm really glad that we put in the game. Normally, if you're going to separate a mother and a child, you're going to do it in a dramatic way, maybe a violent way. And we decided that no, they're going to be separated because that is life. Because kids grow up and they need to find their own voice and have their own life. And then the moment when they meet up again, and then the ending. And in this case, it was all about building monuments to things, and the final moment will be that the child has built a monument to her mother. And we all like the story, and so eventually we changed it. So we took these characters that we had and kind of like combined them in a way. So we have the mother and a child, but the mother has the dress of this other character and the name of this other character, and made a few versions of that, and these are the characters as they look in the game at the end. But we didn't want to have a character that is just a mother, because that is not a character. So we wanted to make sure that she had other things going on for her, that she has a child, so she is a mother, but she's also a daughter to someone else, and she has a job, and she has friends, and she has things that she likes. A bunch of new characteristics for a character that in the original Monument Valley we didn't have anything like that. And then we made a new demo. This is in February. That kind of like had the idea of the game closer to what the game is now, only 4 months before releasing the game. And these are the first 2 levels to be kind of final. Again, you'll see there's a different thing at the end of the level because they're supposed to be building the top of the monument. But we had this story moment. But this level actually was supposed to be when the mother is alone, but she's kind of like starting to be happy again about her own life and finding a new purpose in life. She is building this beautiful monument to all the things in life that are joyful. But we had to make this demo, and this level was looking good, but it didn't have any real story moment. So we decided that we're going to move this level to a different place in the game, and it's going to be the time when the child is for the first time controllable under the watchful eye of the mother. And we did this a bunch of times. So this is the game in February when we moved the islands level there. And then, oh, you know what, the mother story now is too short, and we want the mother to be the main character, and we want to have something going on for her, but she's not really doing anything. It's like just seeing cool places, but that's not a thing. Where, on the other hand, the child has all the cool stuff, that she meets the totem, and she got this crazy level, and there's a lot of like storytelling opportunities in this. So we decided, well, what do parents do when the children abandon the house? Well, they go and hang out with their old friends. So we decided that the totem was the friend, and then we gave the mother all those levels. And the ending wasn't really working, so we decided to just get rid of it, and we built another new level for the ending. That was better, that you could play both characters, and it had some moments, but it wasn't really kind of like punching you in any way. So we decided to get rid of like the last fourth of the game and made a new level. Again, wasn't really working, but we decided to kind of like stop there, and we're going to leave it there. And we're going to work on the beginning of the game. There is a big crap. So we're going to add this other moment, the moment when they separated a bit more dramatically, that we had in one of the old demos. And then the beginning of the game was, again, saying nothing about the story. So we decided to get rid of that level that was completely finished and make another one. This is probably March or April, 2 months before release. And again, some moments, like the child has always grown up here. It used to be after this level, now it's after this level. So we might keep the story moments in place and change the levels as well. So we want to be really malleable and making sure that nothing is really kind of like set in stone unless it's completely necessary. Again, we knew that we wanted to work on the end again. Oh yeah, and this, because why not? Well, the difficulty balance was a bit off now that we had swapped the levels. So we decided to put this back in the beginning and this towards the end because it was more difficult. So this level was always designed to be the mother being sad and alone for the first time. So like, okay, now we need to make visuals for this one that convey all that. And it eventually became having kind of like the first moment of loneliness for both characters. Again, we needed to look at the ending, so that ending wasn't working, needed to go. And we made yet another level, and then we added an epilogue. And that is the story of the game. But we only reached this point. This level was made in May, 1 month before release. And we added lots of things, like last minute, that really made big changes. If you see the day here, this is exactly almost 2 months before release. We decided to, why not bring a new interaction in the game that doesn't exist before. But people really liked it, so we knew that was something good to add. Again, the story was very easy to understand, but it felt a bit pedestrian. It felt like you know exactly what's going on. So we decided to add back these ghostly characters from the first game to really all that they're saying is the same things that the player is seeing when they see what's going on in the game. But having them really makes the game feel more alive, makes the game feel that it has a deeper meaning, that has a world, that has a past. And adding all those things last minute made a big impact in the game. And another thing was the level select menu, which was made started working on it 1 month before we released the game. and this was the kind of like the fourth version of the level select, and that's the one that we went for in the end. Kind of like retains the values of the original, because we tried many other things, and people were always saying, yeah, but the cool thing about the other ones, you can touch it. So we ended up doing something similar, but really late in the game. And that's the game done. So again, I guess my takeaway would be, if you have to know what's at the core of what you're doing. You have to know what is the experience that you want to give players, and you have to be willing to change anything and everything that doesn't fit into that. And if you do it well, it will work. But if you just get too attached to things that they're there just because you made them at some point, then maybe your game won't be as good. And don't worry, because
Life finds
we need sound. Life finds a way. Thank you very much. So if anyone has a question, please ask. This is my first time having a dog in the audience when I do a talk. So if the dog wants to ask any questions, it's more than welcome. Again, if you're shy, you have Twitter and email. But I don't want you guys to be shy. I want you to ask all the things.
If you have a question, just raise the hand and I will pass the mic. We have maybe time for 2 questions, maybe 1. Yeah.
Thanks for a great talk, David. I'm just curious about the other platforms. Again, I know you considered a PC port before with the Monument Valley first. So I wonder if you revisited the idea to dismiss it again, or...
Sorry, say again?
I'm just interested if you are interested in other platforms, or if you just thought about it even with the Monument Valley 2, like PC, for example.
Well, thank you. We tried with the first Monument Valley. I mean, it has been developed on a computer, so of course it works, but it's not the same thing. You have to be able to touch the elements for it to really shine, and when you're doing with a mouse, it doesn't really work. We tried porting it to console and playing with a controller. It was great that you get to control the character directly, and it's very satisfying. But all the elements on screen that you have to be able to touch yourself it was a bit underwhelming, because you had to have either a cursor to move around the screen to touch on the things, which is very clumsy, or kind of like a rotating wheel of like maybe hitting the triggers to like moving in between interactive elements. So it kind of like removed the fun of exploring the level and touching everything to see what works. So it really is a game that is made for touchscreen, and we really, we didn't want to compromise the experience, so it stays on touchscreen.
All right, maybe 1 last question. No?
Come on, you can do it.
Me? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I would like to ask, what was the journey about the sound design? Because the sound design in the game is brilliant. So it was also the big journey of it, or it was much more simple? Thanks.
Well, thanks for your question. The sound design truly is amazing. We have a new sound designer that we started working with when we did Land's End, and the way he likes to work, he likes having kind of like a complete, finished choreography and a finished look for things, because everything in the game is scored to the point. Everything is there for a reason. So that made him really stressed for a lot of time because, again, we like changing things a lot. We change as much as we can, and this doesn't really go well with having a really tight schedule for sound design. So at some point we decided to kind of like change a bit the way we were working, and instead of working on a bunch of levels in parallel, we decided to change that approach to finish levels as quick as possible, maybe putting 2 or 3 artists in one level to make sure that that level was done, so the sound designer could have that level and work on it for a bit. And again, with the visuals, it happened as well. Like maybe it took us a couple of months to finish the first level visually, but after we knew what we were doing at the end of the project, maybe in a couple of days we could finish a level. And I think for the sound it was a bit similar as well. Like there was a big period of exploration and trying out different things, and then eventually you just had to do it. But yeah, everything is bespoke to the levels. Like even the interactive elements, they move with sounds that are in the same scale that the music in the level. Everything is so well thought to the detail that it was a lot of work for Todd Baker as sound designer, but I think it paid off.
Right, thanks.
Well, thank you very much.